Okay, I think we can start in a minute. There are still people coming in, so bear with me another minute and then we will start with the webinar. All right, then let's start. A warm welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us today in this webinar. I'm delighted to have you here with us today, and the name of the webinar is A Growing Opportunity for Nutrition. A special welcome to our colleagues from the UNFFS +4. We truly appreciate you are taking the extra time to be here. And we are also very pleased to welcome members of the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils movement. This webinar is proudly organized in collaboration with VAX, and we're excited to have you as part of this important conversation. My name is Simone Welte. I work as a global nutrition advisor at Welthungerhilfe, and I'm delighted to be your moderator of today's session. Today, we have invited you here to talk about a topic that is gaining momentum in the nutrition and agriculture space, opportunity crops. But what exactly are opportunity crops and why should they play a greater role in our food systems? And that's precisely what we are here to explore. Opportunity crops are often referred to as neglected and underutilized plant species, indigenous or orphan crops. These are species that have long been overlooked in agriculture, investment, and research. Yet these crops are often better adapted to local growing conditions. They are more resilient to climate and richer in micronutrients than many widely promoted staples. Out of more than 300 edible, climate-resilient indigenous species, the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils movement, the VAX, has prioritized 60 key crops and taken a closer look at 20 of them. And in today's webinar, we'll be focusing on these 20 crops and how they might help reshape nutrition and resilience in food systems. In our webinar today, together, we will explore the promise and limitations of opportunity crops. We will understand the policy landscape around opportunity crops. And also we will gain practical recommendations for action going forward. And last but not least, we will also learn about Welthungerhilfe's new tool for identifying national micronutrient gaps and matching them with locally available crops. So despite their potential, the role of opportunity crops in improving nutrition has not yet been analyzed comprehensively. And that's why we at Welthungerhilfe have teamed up with two researchers to conduct the most in-depth analysis to date on how and how much opportunity crops can contribute to better nutrition. I'm thrilled to be joined today by the researchers behind this study, as well as a distinguished panel of high-level experts who will help us unpack the findings and explore what it will take to make opportunity crops truly work for nutrition. But before we dive into the results, I'd like to briefly introduce today's speakers. We'll begin with a presentation of the key research findings delivered by our two lead researchers, Dr. Kendra Bird and Dr. Carolyn Joyce. Kendra is a global nutrition specialist and independent consultant with a PhD in nutritional biology. Her work focuses on sustainable diets, aquatic food systems, and food security. And Caroline holds a PhD in public health and brings expertise in dietary assessment and climate-smart agriculture. Together, they've conducted this comprehensive analysis to date on the potential and also the limitations of opportunity crops. Following their presentation, we'll move into a panel discussion. with our speakers, Kifilbe Roba Moalosi from the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, with Matthias Mogge, CEO of Welthungerhilfe, with Bertha Makandawire from the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA, and with Payman Milani from the Rockefeller Foundation. We will, after this panel discussion, open the floor for a question and answer session. But please feel free to drop your questions already in the chat from now on. There will be a few slots to directly ask questions, but I would really like to motivate you to drop your questions so that we don't miss any. To close, we will hear at the end some final reflections from Arno Bratz, Head of Sector Strategy, Knowledge and Learning at Welthungerhilfe. And I think now it's time to hand over to Dr. Kendra Bird and Dr. Carolyn Joyce. Let's take a look at what the data tells us about the role opportunity crops can play in shaping better nutrition outcomes. Thank you for being here, Carolyn and Kendra, and the floor is yours.
Great, Simone. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Caroline Joyce, and as Simone mentioned, I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Kendra Bird. We're really excited to be presenting the findings from our new study, A Growing Opportunity for Nutrition. Next slide, please. So as many of you well know, micronutrient deficiencies affect over half of women and children globally. In addition to the existing micronutrient challenges, climate change and rising carbon dioxide levels are compounding that problem. And evidence has shown us that rising carbon dioxide can lead to reduced micronutrient content, especially in vitamins and minerals, including iron, zinc, and protein. So even as we grow more food, it may be becoming less nutritious. And these changes to our food supply will increase the prevalence of inadequate micronutrient intake, especially where dietary diversity is low and people rely heavily on staple crops. And while fortification, supplementation, and biofortification are all critical tools, they're not enough on their own. These strategies often leave significant micronutrient gaps unmet and miss the broader benefits of diverse, minimally processed diets. Next slide, please. Our study had two primary goals. The first was to assess the potential of the 20 VAX prioritized opportunity crops to close micronutrient gaps in the 41 countries with the highest burden of hunger. And secondly, we sought to offer practical, evidence-based recommendations to support policies and programs focused on these crops. Next slide, please. In general, we find that the countries with the highest burden of hunger also suffer the highest burdens of micronutrient deficiencies. For the purposes of this study, we used the Global Hunger Index to define our geographic scope. The GHI measures and tracks hunger at the global, regional, and national levels using undernourishment, child stunting, child wasting, and child mortality to capture the multidimensional nature of hunger. Our research study analyzed data from the 41 countries classified as having serious or alarming levels of hunger, which you can see from the map shown here. The majority of these countries can be found in Africa. We had one country in Central America, and the remainder are scattered throughout the Middle East, South Asia, and the Pacific. Thanks again. Next slide, please. This is where opportunity crops come in. The first key takeaway of our research study is that opportunity crops offer a promising solution for hidden hunger and climate resilience. These are nutrient-dense, climate-resilient, and often indigenous crops that are underutilized in current systems. These crops offer a complementary solution, helping to diversify production and diets while simultaneously building resilience to climate and supply shocks. However, it's largely unclear to what extent opportunity crops can contribute to closing micronutrient gaps if they're produced and consumed at larger scales. Next slide, please. So, in an effort to better understand how opportunity crops can help improve nutritional outcomes, we assessed the micronutrient content of all 20 opportunity crops, and we've shown the results here per 100 calories in their cooked form. in addition to 6 of the consumable leafy greens that are produced alongside these crops. We expanded the analysis from the 5 nutrients assessed in the original VAX report to the 12 key vitamins and minerals that are commonly reported in food composition tables and that are often inadequately consumed. So we compared the nutrient values of each of the crops against the nutrient requirements of an adult woman of reproductive age. We also looked at children 6 to 23 months, and we assessed the crops per 100 grams. Each of those results can be found in the full report. So just looking for now for per 100 kilocalories, we find that leafy green vegetables are the most nutrient rich. All 6 of those leafy green vegetables fall up at the top of the graph here and are the most micronutrient dense when looking at the cumulative nutrient composition of all 12 vitamins and minerals. In particular, amaranth leaves provide over 100% of a woman's calcium and iron requirements, and cocoa yams are rich in riboflavin, folate, and vitamin E. We find that fonio was the most nutrient-dense grain of each of the grains we looked at, and their magnesium values were almost 70% per 100 grams, which was second only to ground nuts. Next, we find that lab is particularly high in iron, which is not usually common for fruits and vegetables. And per 25 grams or per 25 calories, they provide about 12 to 14% of a child's recommended iron intake. We also find that orange flesh sweet potato is rich in vitamin A, providing over 100% of a woman's vitamin A requirement. And the leaves of any sweet potato provide almost 200% of vitamin A requirements per 100 kilocalories. I also just want to highlight briefly that although I'm not showing the graph per 100 grams, the ground nuts were actually the most micronutrient dense of all the crops per 100 grams. They were especially high in magnesium, vitamin E, thiamine, and niacin. Next slide, please. So our second key takeaway, you can hit the enter button, please. Thank you. The second key takeaway that we found in our report was that shifting crop production can improve micronutrient availability. We did a few scaling scenarios where we looked at the replacement of rice with amaranth in one country, and we've replaced tomato with okra in 2 other countries, and you can find those expanded analyses in our report. But just to briefly show here, we included the graph comparing the nutrient values of rice to both amaranth grain and amaranth leaves. And as you can see, both parts of the amaranth crop have higher levels of calcium, iron, magnesium, zinc, vitamin A, and folate. In addition, amaranth grain is a rich source of vitamin B6, and the leafy greens of the amaranth crop are a rich source of vitamin C. So as you can imagine, if some of the rice that was consumed by populations could be replaced by amaranth grain and then maybe amaranth leaves mixed into those types of mixed dishes that are already consumed in the country, then you can have really significant nutritional gains. And thirdly, and Tobias, you could hit the enter bar, please. We found that opportunity crops can bridge seasonal food gaps. So while there are many limitations to this analysis that we did, we used rainfall as a proxy for food and nutrition security. So you can see here that many of the crops in a given geographic region, or sorry, many of the countries in a geographic region share similar rainfall patterns, which led to kind of overall similar harvest patterns. So the lines at the top of this graph show when different staple crops are produced in the countries, both including the staple grains and in some cases roots and tubers. So the high reliance on rain-fed agriculture leads to similar outputs in food and nutrition security. And then Kendra will talk in a moment about how opportunity crops can fill some of those gaps. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, and Kendra will take us through the next couple of slides.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you all for being here. So I will cover the geographic distribution of the opportunity crops. And here on the screen, we have just a small sampling of what we have in the report. So this is only a handful of the countries we looked at, well, about half, and only a section, a subsample of the crops that we looked at. And though the original VAX report focused on 20 in sub-Saharan Africa, we did find that these crops are grown commonly not only in Africa, but in the non-Africa countries that we looked at as well, which is encouraging. And you can see here that the light green shows that we were able to find production value for these crops, production data. The dark green shows that there was evidence that the crop was grown in the country, though maybe it was in the form of wild production, naturalized. It could have been cultivated as well, just on a smaller scale, as the production data weren't as precise. And the gray bar shows that the crop was evidenced only in what's called the Q database. So this is encouraging that a number of these climate resilient, nutrient rich opportunity crops are already grown in these countries. And to see the full scope, you can head to the report. Next slide, please. We also looked at how the crops could contribute to seasonal food insecurity in a given country. And so we did that by looking at the harvest of the crop by month of the year and found some encouraging findings here too. If you look at Burundi, for example, and the sweet potato, taro, and yam, so those tuber crops are able to be harvested somewhere in the country at every month of the year. And so this is encouraging because we know that people living in these countries experience seasonal food insecurity. Perhaps these opportunity crops that can be harvested more frequently can contribute more heavily to addressing food insecurity in the country. We also found that in Chad, okra, for example, can be harvested year-round in certain parts of the country. And so this was exciting, and just pointing out that you can eat from the okra plant, from the same plant, you can eat both the pod and the leaves. Next slide, please. And our fourth key takeaway is that opportunity crops offer co-benefits for the environment, economy, and society at large. As many of you know, you're interested in opportunity crops, but we'll just highlight a few of the things that we found about the benefits of opportunity crops. So environmental benefits include that opportunity crops can improve the water infiltration systems, the soil structure. They can reduce erosion and sequester carbon to a greater extent than stable crops often. And considering that they are indigenous to the environment in which they are grown, they require fewer inputs and are well adapted to the native conditions. For the social inclusion aspect, we found that women are often growing these crops, cultivating these crops. So increased investment and attention to these crops can build up women's small and medium enterprises and can build up smallholder farmer productions, SMEs, providing, as we know, women provide a critical role in our food systems. So investing in opportunity crops has some synergistic effects for both women involved in the food system and nutrient intakes by consumers. And lastly, they provide some economic co-benefits because the crops are able to be traded by small and medium enterprises, smallholder farmers, and this regional trade can stabilize food prices, expand markets, and reduce the risks for these smallholder producers. Lastly, scaling up the production of these opportunity crops requires better data, policy alignment, and support for farmers, many of which you would all agree with on the call today. But we've made some specific recommendations that we'd like to share. And our policy analysis also found that while it was encouraging that 60% of the policies, whether they're nutrition policies of the country, the agriculture policies, the biodiversity, or the climate change policies, 60% mentioned at least one opportunity crop. So these opportunity crops are on the radar of many countries. However, only 14 linked the opportunity crops to nutrition or climate goals. So there's a real opportunity for synergy here that is currently not being taken advantage of. And again, this is just a screenshot of some of the country's policies. You can see much more extensive findings in the report. Of course, opportunity crops are not without limitations. This is just one tool in the toolbox. And so while we know that we saw in the graph, and you'll see in the report that many opportunity crops are micronutrient dense, especially compared to staple crops such as rice, the key to any healthy diet is diversity. So we're promoting these opportunity crops as part of a diverse, healthy diet that includes animal source foods. As diets with little to no animal source foods can make it challenging to meet all the nutrient requirements, especially for young children, especially for pregnant women, and especially for nutrients such as iron, zinc, and B12, which is not found in any of the opportunity. B12 is not found in any of the opportunity crops as it's not generally found in plants. Additionally, the biodiversity of these nutrients can be lower in opportunity crops than from animal source foods for some nutrients. And further, many opportunity crops from the data that we do know may have lower yields than the staple crops. And this is because of the staple crops have been optimized, their yields have been optimized. This has not yet been done for a number of opportunity crops, but by doing this, people can increase their yields when they grow opportunity crops and increase their profits and the availability of the nutrients, or the opportunity crops can increase in the food system. However, just to note, these opportunity crops were selected because they often outperform traditional staples under heat, water, or nutrient stress. And with that, I will highlight our 4 categories of policy recommendations. You can find more policy recommendations if you head to the report, but I'll just highlight a few here. The first being that we need more investment in data, research, and innovation for opportunity crops. So as I said, the yields have not necessarily been maximized as they have been for many major staple crops. So we need more investment and more data around opportunity crops to help ensure people that they're growing a crop that can make a profit. The second is to scale location appropriate opportunity crops to reduce micronutrient gaps. We see around the world many people are consuming diets that lead to inadequate nutrient intakes. And this is worse in some locations than others. So the opportunity crops can really address these location appropriate hunger that we see in these countries where people are consuming a diet low in certain nutrients, and these opportunity crops indeed have those nutrients. For example, calcium is one of the nutrients that's commonly underconsumed globally. Amaranth leaves have a good deal of calcium. Number 3 is to promote coherent nutrition-sensitive policies and trade environments. So we saw from the policy review that there could be some more synergy around opportunity crops and other development goals in the country. And one specific thing I wanted to point out is that you'll see in the report, and you may have seen it on the screen, that many countries do not have food-based dietary guidelines. Many countries in Africa do not have food-based dietary guidelines. This is a good opportunity for developing those and incorporating opportunity crops in food-based dietary guidelines, thus getting these crops into more policies and promoting the consumption of these crops. And our 4th category of policy recommendations is to embed opportunity crops in food and nutrition system strategies. So again, this is one tool in the toolbox. They can be promoted, opportunity crops can be invested and promoted alongside other interventions to increase animal source food consumption and to as interventions such as large scale food fortification, et cetera, because of course, opportunity crops are just one piece of the puzzle. And with that, I would love to, it'll be great to hear from the panelists and have an excellent discussion later.
Thank you so much, Kendra and Caroline, for presenting the results. There is a report, yes, and if not yet done, there will be also a link provided to come to the report to read much more results. I have read the report several times now, and still I'm astonished and as excited how many micronutrients are in these crops, and that we have overlooked these rich crops for so long. We have asked you at the beginning to fill in a poll, and now we can see the results. We have asked which one is your favorite opportunity crop. Oh, and we see we have quite a few favorite ones, but it seems as if there are a lot of fans of sorghum, and yeah, I think sorghum seems to be the top opportunity crop. And also we asked, why do you actually like opportunity crops? And there we have a much clearer result, because they are nutritious, and indeed they are nutritious. So thank you that you have taken part in this short poll. And now I would like to go to our panelists and have a little discussion with our distinguished guests here. I will introduce them and ask a question, and then I hope we have enough time to discuss more. First of all, it's a pleasure for me to introduce to you Kifilwe Oba Moalosi, a seasoned nutrition advisor at African Union Development Agency, CIMMYT, where Kifilwe leads key initiatives in food systems, nutrition policy, and food safety across the African continent. With over 20 years of experience, she has played a pivotal role in developing the African Food Safety Strategy and the African Union Development Agency / CIMMYT Nutrition and Food System Implementation Strategy. Welcome, Kifilwe. And Kifilwe, as we have asked our audience, I also would like to ask you, if you want to share with us, do you consume one or more opportunity crops regularly in your household?
Thank you so much, Simona, and greetings everyone. I'm actually speaking from Addis Ababa, where we are having the UNFSS +4. Yes, indeed. I'm from Botswana, Southern Africa, and we consume a lot of sorghum. And I'm happy to see that sorghum is topping up there. So when I was growing up, for example, in the morning we have sorghum porridge, but how we make it is that we ferment it. So we do fermented sorghum, and that's how we consume it. Because it's our staple food in Botswana and most of the Southern African countries, we can even consume it for evening. For example, we can make it like a hard, stiff sorghum and have it with protein and local vegetables. And in Botswana, in some of the schools, they are using sorghum as part of the school meals program. So you find that even in schools, young children are consuming sorghum for breakfast at schools, but it's a very popular crop that we consume a lot. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for sharing this, so we can actually share recipes with you. However, I also wanted to ask you, Kifilwe, opportunity crops are often still perceived as a poor people's food. That may discourage their wider acceptance. And I was wondering if you want to share the perspective of the African Union Development Agency. Is this perception justified? And how can we actually shift mindsets to recognize the value of these crops?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Simone. One thing that we do as the AU Development Agency, we actually have established a program for the youth, whereby we work with young chefs across Africa region to promote some of indigenous foods, including underutilized crops or opportunity crops, like you mentioned, and promoting the consumption of those foods by using, creating different recipes. And in 2023, for example, we're in Zambia, whereby we had a continental forum or continental meeting where these young chefs were doing culinary skills, using this opportunity crops to promote consumption of that. We also, within our different frameworks, for example, we have the bigger framework called the CADAP framework, which is the Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program. In there, we just recently launched another one called the Kampala CADAP strategy, and our heads of states actually endorsed that strategy. And within there, one of the key strategic objectives is actually to promote traditional foods that also include opportunity crops. So we are infusing that through policies at country level through programming. And one of the programs that we actually use now is the home grow school feeding program, whereby we work with the community leaders, community producers, smallholder farmers to really grow some of these indigenous crops and include them as part of the school meals. We also work with different partners such as the World Food Program, PCD, which is Partnership for Child Development. We have a tool that we analyze some of the school menus across Africa. And in there, we actually want to understand if the current menus are really meeting the dietary intake. And if they're lacking macronutrients, we look into what is available seasonally, indigenous, locally, that can be actually added into the school menus to make them healthy and nutritious. And we did that in Ghana, in Ashanti region, where we are in a community area with the some women, the cooks, schools, and they were demonstrating how they can use, for example, one of the cassava leaves, the cheke leaves in Ghana, which is rich in iron, to use it included as part of the healthy diets for school meals. So in policies also, we advocate for that. And we do have some advocacy events during different platforms like the Pan-African Parliament. We do also make presentations and promote healthy diets and looking into use of these indigenous foods or opportunity crops. So we do also advocate for consumption of those crops, yes.
Thank you so much for sharing all this. There's a lot of ongoing I see already. Thank you. Yeah, so let's hear what our other panelists would like to share. Please welcome Matthias Mogge, CEO of Welthungerhilfe since 2018. Matthias is an agriculture engineer and an environmental scientist, and he brings over 25 years of experience in international development and food security. Matthias has led programs across West Africa and held senior roles in innovation and knowledge management. And he also contributes his expertise through advisory roles with global nutrition and development initiatives. Welcome, Matthias. And Matthias, I also would like to ask you if you could maybe share with us the last opportunity crop you ate, and was that a part of your regular diet or something more of a special thing?
Hello, everyone, and also greetings here from Addis Ababa. We also participated in the United Nations Food System Summit. And as you can imagine, when you are here in Addis Ababa or in Ethiopia, you cannot avoid eating the delicious injera made from teff. And we have just seen in the tables that teff is one of the opportunity crops. But I can also say that more than 30 years ago, I lived in Sudan. And also there, I enjoyed very much fermented millet, which is then put into or transformed into a porridge, and very delicious.
That's true. It's very delicious, often these opportunity crops, and I appreciate teff a lot too. Matthias, but now a question to you. If these opportunity crops offer such strong nutritional and climate benefits, why aren't we seeing them on every plate every day? What do you think are barriers, maybe in markets, households or so? What is still holding back?
Yeah, I think there are many dimensions or many aspects which needs to be considered. First of all, often these crops are not available. They're not available on the market. They are not available in households. They are not available in the field. They are just not grown. Then I think an aspect is also sometimes at least affordability. Some of these crops, because of they're sometimes rare to find on the market, they have sometimes, for some people, quite a high price and are therefore not available. Then I think probably they are not always the first preference of consumers. Maybe because of convenience, or I don't know, other crops are easier to get. They are maybe more preferred, and therefore opportunity crops are maybe not the first choice. Another aspect, and we have heard that already from Kendra and also Caroline, that often they are not promoted enough, probably in countries from the political side. They are not. Sometimes you can find them a little bit in policies, but not enough, and they're not promoted enough. Extensionists are not enough trained, but also nutritionists maybe don't promote them enough, and also health workers are maybe not promoting them enough. Then what I also see is when we are talking about food, sometimes we're just looking at production, yeah, and we're maybe often favoring those crops which are characterized by minimum risks for farmers, for example, yeah, because seeds are available, they yield very high. We have heard that already, and therefore maybe farmers are rather opting for those crops which produce high yields and maybe also a high return on the market. So maybe that's another aspect, and there are probably many, many more, but just to name a few of these factors.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you so much. So I think we have to go into more detail later, because we heard from Kefilwe how much already is ongoing. Yeah. So let's see what we can further work on. I would like to now introduce our next speaker on the panel. We are joined by Bertha Makanda-Wire. She is a nutrition advisor at the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA. She brings deep expertise in integrating nutrition into agriculture to strengthen food and nutrition security across Africa. Bertha has led regional efforts to improve dietary diversity and promote nutrition-sensitive agriculture, with a focus on resilience, on policy support, and inclusion of women and youth in food systems. Bertha, now I would like to ask you, is there an opportunity crop you grew up with eating? And if yes, what makes it maybe so special for you until today? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Simone. Yes, I'm Beth and I work here at AGRA. I lead on nutrition. And I think for me, the issue of nutrition is two ways. Growing up, as you asked, my favorite opportunity crop was cowpeas, because the cowpea was grown by my grandmother, and I used to accompany her to the field. So every time I'm hungry, she could quickly just go in the field, take some cowpeas and roast them, and I could snack on them. So they were very nice as snacks. Or sometimes she could mix them with green maize and cook them. Sometimes when they're dry, we could eat them as stew. So they were used in different ways. Sometimes my grandmother could make them into flour and mix them with sorghum or millet and make us a paste, a thick paste. So it was always something that I grew up enjoying, but I also grew up with almost most of the opportunity crops that you were just showing here. So even now, I like eating. My main staple is I mix sorghum and cassava flour to make the thick paste. In Malawi, we call it in sima. In Zambia, we call it in shima. In Kenya, we call it ugali. So I like mixing the cassava and either sorghum or millet. And I also like the cowpeas mixed with other legumes, but also the cowpea leaves are very good if you mix with groundnuts. So we used to eat that a lot when I was growing up. So I haven't moved much from this diet. I still maintain it in my household, yes.
And I can see you still are really happy thinking of this diet, how good feeling it gave when your grandmother did that for you. Yeah, so thank you for sharing this. I was also wondering if, Bertha, if you could tell us a little bit about scaling opportunity crops. That is not a small task. We have already heard about the barriers and so on. It takes time, investment, it takes behavior change, which is very difficult to do. But from AGRA's perspective, why should we actually pursue that path when more immediate solutions are available?
Thank you. So for us as AGRA, opportunity crops fall within the sustainable farming and climate resilient work that we do. But also we have taken on youth and women empowerment, youth for job creation, especially. We have a target to create more than 1 million jobs, and for women to also be involved. So opportunity crops, especially for women, even the study confirmed that they allow women to be able to play in this value chain easier than the main crops. And most of the times when women participate in these opportunity crops, it gives them the money that belongs to them. Than when they are participating in rice production, maize production, it becomes a big family crop, and the control, the power dynamics at household level limits them to have control over those crops. So as AGRA, opportunity crops are lead a pathway for job creation among the youth, as well as for women empowerment, as well as nutrition. AGRA has moved from being a crop heavy based on the staples that we are, to now being more diverse. We are exploring a lot in terms of these opportunity crops. In Burkina Faso, we are promoting a lot of sorghum, a lot of millets, and we have taken in a strategy where we opportunity crops becomes our secondary crops, because AGRA, most of the times we work with governments. So sometimes government policies dictate what kind of crop can you invest in. So you find that a country will have a flagship called rice flagship, maize flagship, soybean flagship, or some kind of flagship. So AGRA supports government to develop those. But along that, we've realized that the more we bring in opportunity crops, the better for job creation, for women empowerment, for nutrition itself, and for resilience. So as you said, it's not easy to scale opportunity crops because of all the barriers we have understood. But we know the school feeding is one part which has already been talked about. But we're exploring other ways of using these opportunity crops in more than just school feeding. So you are looking at, could we introduce opportunity crops within food product development? We're working with the youth. And one area what we want to invest in a lot is how can these young people go beyond production to play along the value chains, so from production, processing, all the way. So is there an opportunity that we can build a mall? Like, for example, a lot of opportunity crops are the source of a lot of ingredients for infant foods. So if you are going to go into business into complementary foods, how do you bring on board these opportunity crops to go in these diets? And again, opportunity crops are very versatile. They're able to mix with other crops. You can lead a mix cowpeas and sorghum and make a porridge out of it. So we're also looking into that aspect. And the policies themselves, as AGRA, we're increasingly now challenging governments to say it's not the food system performance cannot be measured by the amount of maize we harvested. A household can have a full silo of maize and still the children are malnourished. That just shows you how limited that investment is. So we are calling for diversity increasingly, and we are increasingly focusing on how do we introduce these foods early in children, so that as they grow, they are growing up with these foods as well.
Thank you so much, Bertha, for this insight into AGRA's approach. Now, I would like to move to our fourth panelist, and I'm excited to welcome Peyman Milani here. He is the director of the Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. There he has led transformative efforts since 2022 to promote regenerative school meals, sustainable food systems, and nutritious whole grain diets across Africa and beyond. With 20 years of experience spanning East and West Africa, South and Southeast Asia, and the Americas, Peyman's leadership in nutrition innovation has shaped global food security strategies. Thank you for being here today, Peyman. And Peyman, I assume you're also a fan of opportunity crops. When it comes to your diet, what's the biggest challenge for you to eat more of them?
Thank you very much, Simon, for both that kind introduction and for inviting me to the panel. And it's a pleasure to be here with the colleagues. I speak to you from Nairobi. I just flew in back from Addis, also at the UN FSS+4 event. So for me, amaranth and sesame are on my daily diet. They're part of my daily breakfast. Occasionally, I also have porridge here with sorghum and millet. It's the brown porridge, right? The brown uji that we have here in Kenya, which is also very nutritious and delicious. So the challenge to include more of those in our diets, I mean, so there's, let's say, you can look at it from the demand and the supply side, right? I mean, on the demand side, I think several of the colleagues have already highlighted how there are, let's say, perception issues, stigma issues. Sometimes I think, we should have a tagline that says grandma knew best, right? I mean, they knew best, both in terms of those opportunity crops, but even if you consider the big three crops, just the shift to whole grains already brings a lot of nutritional and environmental benefit, right? In fact, I mean, that's one, let's say, perhaps a little feedback that I would give to the very good study that Kendra and Caroline have conducted, that it's not just about micronutrients, right? I mean, it goes beyond that. I mean, it's about macronutrients as well as dietary fiber and all the bioactive compounds, most of which are lost in the refining of grain. So just by moving into these opportunity crops, because thankfully they are not refined, they're consumed as whole grain or whole flour, there is already tremendous benefit there.
Mm.
And then on the supply side, what we have is really, let's say, the vicious cycles or lack of virtuous cycles that the Green Revolution has brought about. The Green Revolution had its role in averting famine and increasing food security, but it's led to a tremendous concentration in food systems, both, let's say, in terms of corporate concentration, but especially in terms of the diet on the big three grains, which unfortunately, when the Green Revolution was ushered in, were already being predominantly consumed in refined form. So when we go from either white rice or refined maize flour to one of these opportunity crops, the gains are manifold because there's sort of this double dividend of going whole grain, but also these are, as well explained, nutritionally very dense. They are inherently more nutritious dense than many other crops.
Thank you so much for this. I think, Payman, you also wanted to share a little bit about promising pathways to integrate opportunity crops into school feeding programs and what challenges still stand in this way of efforts. And I think you also brought some slides, right?
Thank you, and I promise only three. But this is really just to highlight that in addition to, of course, supporting the VAX initiative, we have a body of work that's developed over the past 5 years around the idea of fortified whole grains and whole blends, right? Because we started this journey in the context of COVID and looking at how could we best reach uh, what we consider to be one of the most vulnerable populations, which is low-income children who perhaps have access to, a porridge in an early childhood development center or something at school, right? So we realized very quickly that budgets were already, let's say, overstretched even before COVID hit. We had to focus on changes that were nutritious positive, yet budget neutral within these school menus, say. So that's why we realized that our starting point had to be the big three grains because there are trade-offs, right? I mean, they are increasing diet and food system benefits. The more you move towards opportunity crops and these whole blends, but they are increasing costs as well because, again, they're not where the big three crops, and again, I'm taking just the case of grains here for simplicity, where they are given all the investments in R&D, technology, extension, etc., of the big three grains through the Green Revolution. But the intent was always to start with the big three and then gradually move towards bringing in the secondary grains, legumes and pulses, the opportunity crops, and eventually even other foods, right? When you think of these whole blends and sort of mixed powder forms, right? Which are very versatile food products. So What we did more recently, and this is in collaboration with the Boston Consulting Group, is to look more specifically in Kenya to the opportunity to bring sorghum and millet into school meals, primarily really trying to replace white rice, which if one looks at both nutritional value and environmental footprint, is really at the very bottom of the scale. I mean, it's the one that has by far the largest environmental footprint of all grains, and yet when polished or white rice offers the least nutrition. So next slide maybe, and I'll quickly conclude this. So we looked at millet and sorghum, across a range of macro and micronutrients. Sorry, it's the one before, the one that has the multiples. There you go, thanks. So if you take the baseline of either refined maize flour or polished rice, you can see that millet, sorghum, and even unpolished or brown rice offer a multiple in terms of nutrition. Then, of course, the issue of cost. I mean, and there are multiple benefits, nutritional satiety, which in 2 independent studies we've done in Kenya, emerged as the second highest importance attribute parents see in school meals. I mean, the first one is healthiness, but right after that is satiety. So that's an added benefit. And of course, we're talking here not just about undernutrition, but also about growing overweight and obesity, right? As you go towards whole grains and these opportunity crops. So I'll conclude with the next slide, which shows this, the current state of the analysis in looking at not only the nutritional benefits, but actually how much the government of Kenya could save in effect by making those shifts of introducing these opportunity crops in school meals in lieu of primarily white or polished rice, but also refined maize flour. So let me just quickly navigate here. This is the current spend on the Kenya School Meals Program, which currently reaches about 2.6 million children. One thing we've done is in the both ugali or shima, the harder version or the polenta type of maize meal preparation or the porridge, if we went from 100% refined maize flour to a blend of 90% whole maize flour and 10% millet, so it's a 90-10, as we call it, maize millet blend, that would drive the cost a little bit up because millet overall on the market still costs more, average of 30 to 40% across the year than maize. However, if once we replace refined and white rice with red sorghum, that right there could bring a savings of 865 million shillings annually. And this is something that we have actually piloted with about 40,000 students with a little bit of social behavior change. By the end of the pilot, the kids liked the red sorghum and were totally fine with it. Nobody was demanding the return of white rice. So that can further reduce the spend once you factor in the health benefits. And health benefits here, looking just on iron deficiency anemia alone, given how much iron dense these opportunity crops are, there's another estimated gain of 45 million shillings. There can also be additional gains from the fertilizer savings, right, that go into the production of the white rice. So let's say the conservative gain is of 700 million shillings. That's about $5.5 million per year. That's not even factoring additional benefits on the environmental side that accrue from reduced greenhouse gas emissions, reduced water and land use, and the like. So this is just to say that opportunity crops are opportunities, not just nutritionally, but also even financially in these school meals programs. And our informal ambition is to get rid of white rice in school meals and replace it with opportunity crops. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Payman, for sharing also this evidence that underpins your argument or your point of eliminating white rice. Yeah, I also have to take a look at the clock, and I think time is flying as always. But we have another round of questions, but please keep it short. Thank you so much. Matthias, I wanted to come back to you, and also I wanted to ask you to give a little bit of an outlook. What do you think? What is in the next 5 years? What will come for opportunity crops? But also, can you maybe share what Welthungerhilfe is doing at the moment, and what you think is the future of opportunity crops in Welthungerhilfe? Matthias.
Wow, this is a very broad question, and we'll really keep it short because we should really reserve some time for all for answering these very interesting questions which were posed already. I mean, Welthungerhilfe is working on opportunity crops since many years, and we have really tried together with a lot of partners to implement seed multiplication schemes in various countries to make seeds, certified seeds, available to farmers in particular, but also work with the private sector to improve food processing so that the crops can be found in markets, but also in supermarkets in the bigger towns. We are working with certification schemes so that there is really an international recognition also of these opportunity crops. So these are really just to give you an idea that where the potential, I think, also is with opportunity crops. It's not just to have farmers cultivating these opportunity crops, but to make them really widely available and to use market systems, also to discuss, influence, lobby with governments on various levels, yeah, to promote these opportunity crops much more. And I was really amazing payments calculations, which are really interesting and which shows that it is not only nutritional value, but also an economical value if you introduce them more widely.
That's true. Thank you so much, Matthias. Yeah, time's flying, as I said. But Bertha, I wanted to come back to you, and also the question for you, the outlook a little bit. Where do you see the role, or where would you love to see the role of opportunity groups playing in diets across Africa in the next few years? And maybe you can put a special point here. What can we do in the next years to make them affordable for the broader people in Africa and maybe also Asia? Thank you.
Yeah.
Bertha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think as Africa as a continent, the first starting point is understanding our food systems. Within our food systems, what are we investing in? What I've noticed the past decade is our investments are not directed at nutrition. We are looking at trade, we are looking at volumes, we are looking at economic gains, counting how much are we making, what is it contribute, how much is it contributing to our GDP. I think we're missing a point there. Our investment should be, is the food system delivering for nutrition? We should start counting nutrients on the plate, not the volumes and the amount of bags that we're harvesting in terms of maize. I think there we miss a point. So policy-wise, I think as the next decade, as Kefiri said, the next decade of the CADIP brings a bigger opportunity for us to ensure that the opportunity crops makes it, the food-based dietary guidelines, only a few countries have them. They should make it to the food-based dietary guidelines. The food system talk should not be on how it is right now. We should focus on nutrients that are landing on the plate. If you look at the infant foods right now in Africa, there's a huge gap. A lot of African children are fed on calorie dense. So knowledge is also going to be very important going forward. How do we bring that knowledge to the mother in a rural village? We're in the age of technology, digital and AI. At least someone has an access to a phone, to information. We should prioritize those platforms to send the right messages and the kind of investments government are doing. If they're doing farm input subsidies, for example, what is this package looking like? Is it just fertilizer and maize seed, or is it going to be at least 4 minimum opportunity crops in a given geography? For example, the village I come from, we have cowpeas, we have sorghum, we have about 8 of the opportunity crops that you beamed there. Is government going to be able to understand? And research will be very important, because government will only make decisions based on the available data and information. These crops were already there. They were being consumed, but government policies pushed them out a lot, because we are pursuing volumes, we are pursuing gains than pursuing nutrition. So if we put nutrition high on the outcome agenda within the food system performance, then we are going to see more and more of these opportunity crops making, because truth be told, not many African governments can afford micronutrient supplementation. A lot of that is coming from donors. If the aid goes, Africa will have to face the reality of financing themselves. Therefore, they have to go for those pathways that will be cheaper and affordable. And opportunity crops, for example, they're cheaper. The farmers are in control. A farmer is not in control of a vitamin A tablet. They are not. They don't even know what it is, but they're in control of the food that gives them vitamin A. So that's how governments should start prioritizing, looking, and framing their policies. I think that's the way I would really want, and that's the way I would really want to see AGRA engaging governments along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bertha. Counting micronutrients on the plates. I like that a lot. Thank you so much. Now I would like to ask you, Kefil, where in 5 years' time, what do you think policies should be shaped? Where are the most important policies that need to be shaped to actually enable opportunity crops to contribute more efficiently to nutritious, affordable, and diverse diets? Kefil, where the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simona. Thanks for everything. As I mentioned when I first intervened, our heads of states this year during the African Union Summit in February have endorsed a very powerful framework, which is the Comprehensive Agriculture Africa Development Program. And we have started now working with the member states to domesticate this important framework. For example, we're in Sierra Leone last week, worked with the government of Sierra Leone, looking to the National Agriculture look into the policies and trying to create a synergy between the Sierra Leone food systems pathways with the National Agriculture Investment Plans, and trying to see what are the priority programs, what is the national government prioritizing when it comes to investment in nutrition and food security. And one of the areas that the member states actually look into is the involvement of the youth. Like I mentioned, we have launched a youth program, and in there we talk a lot about the value addition of this in local food, indigenous foods. And we have also worked with government of Norwegian government, for example, through a CIMMYT agriculture program, working with the youth and the women in Cameroon, in Kenya, in Malawi, and Ethiopia. And in there also, we're looking to technologies that are available in terms of value addition to these indigenous foods, but we also look into the food safety aspect part of it. What are the standards out there that also really, preserving or improving the quality of these indigenous foods? There's a lot of urbanization. For example, in Africa, people are moving from communities to the cities. We have competition of the convenience foods from the supermarkets or retail industry, but how do we invest and add value into the indigenous foods? Looking into the packaging, how do we make them attractive? And also look into food composition of these indigenous foods to promote consumption of that. We have to know what is actually included in those indigenous foods. The food packaging, food labeling also is a very important issue that we are trying to educate our young people in Africa. As you know, 70% of Africa in continent and the population of Africa is young. 70% of them are young people. So we want to really ensure that we champion these young people to really promote indigenous foods and also to understand the knowledge of how to add value and preserve some of these opportunity foods. So in the next 5 years, we want to change the policies of the African member states, by really infusing the CARA framework, but also our principals also, that really spearheading this important framework, like happening now at the United Food Systems Summit. We just finished a very important CARA event with the young children that we're promoting, healthy diets, and also interrogating the principals. We have ministers that came in, the VPs of Nigeria that were here, our CEO from the AU NEPAD, our commissioners from the AUC, really having a dialogue with these young people here in Africa to say, what do we prioritize, what is important? But of course, traditional foods, we have to go back to the way we used to eat when we were growing up, and look into the seasonal foods and make them available across the year by really adding value to those. Yeah. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kefilja. I think this was a very important point. It's not only about the micronutrient content, but also that these micronutrient-rich opportunity crops are safe to eat. This is very important. Otherwise, it will not be beneficial to health. And then including the youth is, I think, the best idea, of course, because that's the future, and they will shape the food systems of the future. Payman, now looking ahead from your perspectives, what's actually your hope for how opportunity crops could move from being underutilized to become a staple on markets and plates across the world, hopefully?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it will take all of our best efforts. I very much want to echo what both Bertha and Kefilja have said. From our perspective, we really think that the work with school meals carries a lot of promise because actually we're shaping the consumers of the future, right? I mean, our populations are young. In Sub-Saharan Africa, the school-age population represents between a quarter and a third of the overall population. If we get the school meals scaled up, we'll be feeding them about 200 days per year. So that by itself is a sizable market, right? I mean, school meals are both a microcosm and, let's say, an important component of the overall food system. So what we're trying to do now is, when we think of social marketing, of social behavior change, is to intentionally leverage the well-known spillover effects that exist between the classroom and the household. So kids take the novelties home, right? And if we can be more intentional about it, I think we have a good shot at starting to also create these shifts in consumer attitudes and preferences towards the opportunity crops. But there's a lot of investment to be done. I mean, I saw some of the comments and questions on the Zoom about sort of the risk, right? So we need to address the issue of the risk involved for smallholder farmers in, let's say, increasingly growing more of these crops. Those can't be, let's say, minimized. They're very critical. So for us, that's part of the idea of a agroecological transition or regenerative transition, which will bring more climate resilience. But there are challenges in terms of knowledge dissemination, extension support, technical assistance, and finance. So it's a multi-pronged effort. It's a food system effort. But I think we know well that diversity is very important in the soil, in the crops, on the plate, and on the microbiome. So that's a journey that, let's say, for me is a very key component of food systems transformation overall.
Thank you so much, Payman. I could continue discussing with you, but time is flying. And as you mentioned, Payman, there are good comments and questions in the Q&A section. And I would like to ask my colleague Tobias to bring some of these good comments and questions. And then also I would like to ask the panel to answer the questions, or even Kendra and Caroline if they are specific to the research findings. Tobias.
Yeah, happy to report from the Q&A section. One thing I think we can sum up a few questions on one specific part, which is the leaves of the opportunity crops. There was one question in how far actually eating leaves is a tradition at all. Connected to that is how can we actually promote eating parts of crops that are not so common culturally to eat. And then there's also the interesting question, comparing the leaves with others in how far, eating, how much kilo or grams of leaves you actually need to eat to intake the same amount of kilocalories compared to, for example, yams. So maybe open to the panel or also our scientists to respond to that one.
Who would like to go first?
I can just address the last part of the question where panelists were asking how much of the leaves. 100 kilocalories of leaves is not a lot. Of obviously when you need a diet of about 2,000 kilocalories. That's what we were trying to emphasize, sort of the small amount of leaves that you need to consume to get a big amount of a big percentage of nutrients fulfilled. So that's why nutritionists are always saying eat your leafy greens, eat your vegetables, just because they provide so many nutrients for the relatively small amount that you need to consume. 100 kilocalories won't make you that full, but it will provide a lot of nutrients. I'll let others weigh in. I know there's a lot of tradition of eating leaves, but we know from sort of global data that many people in Africa and other countries, of course, do not eat enough vegetables, right? So even though you don't have to eat much of them to get the nutrient benefit, people are consuming them in amounts that are lower than the recommendation. And so maybe we need more social behavior change around that. Maybe that's the low-hanging fruit. Just incorporating those into messaging a little bit more, but there's limitations,
Yeah, thank you. Any comment from the panel on the leaf questions and how to maybe make them more attractive for people's diets?
Okay, maybe I can weigh in on that. Yeah, so I think across Africa, different communities consume leaves from these opportunity crops at in different ways. Mostly it's boiled and added with maybe groundnuts, but it's a very common practice. But I think due to the urbanization, a lot of people, even in rural areas, are replacing even their own indigenous vegetables with the other vegetables. So you find that in a rural village, people will have kale or spinach, which are not very indigenous to many African places, instead of what they are used to, what has been. So for the past 20 years, I would say the practice of consuming leafy vegetables from indigenous is decreasing, but it has been our tradition of consuming these vegetables from all sorts. Like from my village, we have from cassava, we have from cowpeas, we have from pumpkins, we have all sorts of vegetables and most of the opportunity crops there. So you find that different regions of Africa have their specific different indigenous vegetables, but I think we really need behavior change communication to increase. Cookery sessions have to be there because people will experiment in a group and test them, and if they find that okay, this one is agreeing with me, they would adopt. So I think we got to a point where we did not put much emphasis on nutrition education over the past 5 years. I felt like nutrition education was slipping away, but it's very important in terms of influencing behaviors and bringing people back to what they already know. It's not starting from scratch. Yeah,
bringing people back to what they already know. That's a good point. Thank you, Bertha. I would give back the floor to Tobias, or is there somebody on the panel who would like to contribute?
Actually, there's a lot going on in the Q&A section, and I'm happy to sum up, if I'm allowed, a couple of more questions so that we cover as many as possible in the short time. This one is more about the production and also trade of opportunity crops. First of all, how can we actually increase the production of opportunity crops? And also the question connected, is a barrier currently rather a lack of technology, or is it rather socioeconomic logistical constraints that are barriers to an increased production? And then looking further to trade, here's a suggestion to also conduct follow-up studies regarding supply chains, market studies on opportunity crops. What is planned regarding this aspect? So the whole complex of increasing production and then triggering more trade.
Yes. Thank you, Tobias. I think that is a question especially for our panelists. Maybe.
I think when it comes to, maybe I can start. I think when it comes to production, I think there is a lot of potential to invest more in research, and not only in research in research stations, so to say, in university or institutes, but also to do this together with farmers, to do this really on site and try to find to and try to understand what are really the potentials and how to select probably the best varieties. I think there is a huge potential there. I had been on Sunday at a research station here in Ethiopia, and I could really see researchers are doing a lot of research and trying to find varieties which are producing more yield and are at the same time resistant against diseases and so on. So I think there is a big potential, but it needs definitely more research.
Definitely more research. As we have heard also, they have been overseen in the last years. Maybe Kefilwe or Payman, do you want to add on here? No, then fine.
So,
Payman.
no, my a very brief comment is that the more I think we also invest in, let's say, agroecological practices, right, which emphasize the elements of diversification, intercropping, rotation, resilience, etc., that by itself opens up more space, right, for more of these crops to be adopted. Of course, that's just one element on the supply side, but I think that whole trend, which, as everybody knows, we are trying to promote, can also bring sort of puts more wind behind the opportunity crop sales.
Thank you so much. Kefilwe, any last comment from your side? No? Then fine. I think we can maybe have a really, really short last round of question, Tobias.
Yes, and actually also for the information of all the attendees, we will of course look at all the questions asked and answer them later on, but we will not be able to cover all of them in this session. However, let's go for one last one. Allow me to make this selection here. I find this aspect interesting, how healthy and safe are actually genetically modified organisms, GMOs, to be accepted by consumers, especially children and women, as opportunity crop foods. So bringing in this aspect to naturally grown opportunity crops.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one, Tobias, it seems.
I guess so.
Maybe we cannot find an answer today or somebody who has an opinion here. Mm-hmm. Okay, but then I think that is worth a further discussion, and I think we are not at the end with today's webinar. So, but I have to also take a look at the time, and I must say it's time for the closing remarks. We have 10 minutes left in this webinar, and I want to thank the panel, I want to thank the audience, and give the word to Arno for the closing remarks. Arno.
Thank you very much, Simone. And I am thrilled to offer a few, but very brief reflections as we close. I do have to start with just thanking our stellar researchers, Caroline and Kendra, and our dear panelists for your sensational inputs. And I do have to say that listening to you made me reflect on the word opportunity in opportunity crops. And concretely that sometime back in the field, a friend of mine told me a joke. Two economists walk down the road. One says, oh, look, a $20 bill. And then the other one says, no, it can't be a $20 bill because if it was, somebody would have picked it up already. And opportunity crops remind me of that a little bit because the opportunity in them is so massive, and that really has come out of the research very strongly because they do hold a high potential to address hidden hunger in addition to contributing to economic, ecological, and social outcomes. Although, and I will get to that later, there are also trade-offs and caveats to be considered. And now opportunity crops are particularly well suited to improve intakes of calcium, of folate, riboflavin, vitamin C, vitamin E, and others. And just seeing that sheer variety of contributions is pretty astonishing. And that accounts even for nutrients that are less bioavailable in plants, such as iron, zinc, or magnesium, but that do actually occur in very high concentrations. In the likes of lab or amaranth leaves, as an example, particularly the green leafy vegetables among the opportunity crops really stand out there. And furthermore, we've seen that the scaling scenarios in our research show quite strongly that scaling opportunity crop production and consumption can have massive impacts on improving at least the availability of micronutrients, and then hopefully also micronutrient intake. And furthermore, they can actually help to bridge seasonal gaps in nutrition. So looking at all of that, one might say, oh, great, that's a great opportunity. But part of the definition of opportunity is the maybe slightly less obvious conclusion that arose from the panel in this webinar. And that is that an opportunity wouldn't be an opportunity if it had been seized already, quite alike to the $20 bill. So opportunity crops are not yet grown at scale because they are not invested in at scale, because they're not consumed at scale. And we don't have enough time to go into all the reasons why, although there is some good research in this already. But as Gefilwe and Matthias, Bertha, and Payman have highlighted on this call, they're not yet sufficiently accessible, convenient, known, desired, promoted, and profitable yet. And also, I believe Payman mentioned this in one of his last comments, the transition can be very risky for farmers, particularly at a time where they're already facing catastrophic crop failure and declining yields. And so that vicious cycle is something that needs to be broken, and it needs to be broken fast. And frankly, we do need an all hands on deck effort now to shape the future of nutrition together. And a key point of that, not a silver bullet, but a key part of the puzzle is to scale up opportunity crops in a nutrition sensitive manner. And so this report, the report on a growing opportunity for nutrition, kind of provides a good starting point through the data provided, the findings, and importantly, the recommendations. I would also point to the VAX phase 1 and 2 summary report as a key source of information that really goes into facilitators and drivers of scaling up opportunity crops, and of course the wealth of knowledge in the VAX movement and the community of practice. And so right now is the time to come together as a movement. And frankly, I believe that we shouldn't stop at talking, but we need to co-create a flagship program together across the African continent and also across other key regions such as South Asia, where we've seen also major micronutrient intake gaps. And so to help get the conversation started, at least at national levels, at WHH, we were thinking, what can we do? And so looking at that ton of data, our research report basically combines hundreds of data sources from food composition tables, macronutrient intake data, rainfall patterns, production, and whatnot. Looking at all of that, we wanted to make it more accessible. And so we did create a handy dashboard tool. You'll see a quick video running there to kind of show you the ins and outs of that, where you can basically select by country major macronutrient intake gaps. You can explore those further, see how those correspond to the nutrient composition of cooked portions. I repeat, cooked portions of opportunity crops, checking in with production and harvesting calendars, and really kind of identifying what might be good opportunity crops to scale at a national level. Now, I recognize that's just a starting point. A lot more is to be said about biophysical conditions, agroeconomical conditions, etc. More research has to go into this, but it can be a good starting point if you're an entrepreneur, a program developer, or also a government employee looking to promote opportunity crops. The dashboard and the report is available publicly, of course, under whh.org, opportunity-crops. So feel free to check it out. Now, scaling up opportunity crops for nutrition is part of our identity, at WHH. It's part of our organizational strategy and part of why we're very happy to promote this at the N4G Summit and of course in the VAX community of practice. So please do reach out to us. We would love to collaborate on this.
Thank you, Arno. Thank you for these closing remarks and also introducing the new tool we have just worked on. So now we are unfortunately at the end of this webinar, but we are not at the end of the discussion. But I must say thank you all who joined us today for this rich exchange and all these ideas throughout the webinar and all these contributions. A special thanks goes, of course, to our speakers for their contributions and for sharing their expertise on this very important topic. And then I would also like to thank you, the audience. I have seen so many questions and answers and such a rich discussion. Thank you for contributing. Opportunity crops, they may not always take center stage, but as we have seen, they hold great promise for improving nutrition. They hold great promise for strengthening resilience, and they can help advancing sustainable food systems. So let's take today's knowledge forward in our work, in our networks, and our policies. And yes, it has been a pleasure to be here to moderate these sessions. Let's keep this momentum going. Hope to see you soon at another place. Thank you very much. Goodbye.